Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Art Unlimited talk. It's a pleasure to be here and actually to have 3 artists out of the 62 participants of this year's edition of Art Basel Unlimited. To the far left is Olaf Nicolai, an artist based in Berlin. In the middle, Germaine Kruip, Amsterdam-based artist, and Richard Phillips, who's based in New York. I think it's a great opportunity to hear more detailed information about the works that this artist exhibited in Art Basel Unlimited. From my side, I will try to explain you a little bit what the curatorial vision is, that is quite uncommon and totally reverse from normal curatorial work, but I think that's quite interesting. And in the second part of the discussion, we're going to try to speak about different aspects of this format of Unlimited and actually of this attempt to do a museum quality space or exhibition within the context of a commercial art fair. So I think all of you know Art Basel Unlimited. It's actually the 13th edition this year. It was founded in the year 2000. This year we have roughly 9,000 square meters of surface. It's 1.5 kilometer or roughly 1 mile of walls that are built for a show that lasts only 6 days and attracts up to 65,000 visitors. So it's this kind of power package. But I think eventually at the end of the day, what we want to see and what the visitors want to see is to spend time with art and to discover great artworks. And for me, like in all my work around Art Basel Unlimited, the crucial thing was really that I didn't forget at any time that the success of this show would depend on great artworks, and my job would consist in making those accessible to the public. So I want to start with Olaf, actually. Your work is a very specific one. Maybe I give a short introduction from a curatorial point of view of your work. Actually, I know the work of Olaf since many years, and I would describe his work as being strongly conceptually grounded. He always have an intellectual approach to what he wants to do. He often deals with history and with objects that are around, and he has an incredible expertise actually in this reinterpretation of situation, objects, but also a social context of a work. For example, a work that I will never forget is that he transposed a Max Bild painting into a 3-dimensional landscape to be used. So actually he renegotiates a painting, a modernistic painting, into an object to be used and into kind of a public square within the museum. Just kind of a bracket, no numbers, no shows. Of course, he had many shows all over the world, but I want to try to concentrate on a more curatorial introduction. Olaf, it would be great if you would give us a personal insight into Samani, the creation of this work, your thoughts, your observation, and eventually the realization and the going public of that piece.
Thank you for the invitation and for being here and presenting my work. And thank you for the curatorial statement about my work, which I really appreciate. Because when you have a look at Samani, it is more or less in this case that all these things that you were describing are not there. They are in this case very missing. And the references or the historical background or the remaking of things. And that's why this work was also a work for me, which was quite challenging. And what you see here is something what you only can see as a photograph. You cannot see that when you see the piece itself, because the piece is a rotating, dancing spot. That was the short working title for myself when I was working on it. And the first idea was like 4 years ago that I just had this idea, I want to see a dancing spot. So I started to work on that. It was a very simple, no reference, it was just this. Maybe it had to do that I enjoy going to concerts, that I enjoy hanging out with musicians, and then you have the whole lighting system, the equipment, and the movement of these spots. And when you focus on that, it has a own life. It is very animated, but in the sense of anima, the soul. So there it started from, and then I started to work with technicians. How can we make that possible? And slowly turned out it's not only about movement and light, it's also about sound, because the engines which are driving this spot, they create sound. So at a certain point when we had the first version there, and it was the moment to proclaim, to choreography, it was an interesting experience, because everything what I did, it was a sound which I never had heard before, which I could not expect. I did not know how the sound is. And so it was like composing how you dance, to a song which you have not heard before. You start, listen to it, you react to it, and then you think, oh, that would be nice if it continues like that, and then you try to do that, and you see a movement, what you think, oh, no, I like it like this. So it was a very interesting moment to do that, and it was also a process of creating it, which had a very unique approach, was it for me. I mean, it was really something new. And that's why also when it came to the moment where I had to find a title, I thought a title is not the appropriate thing. It's better to name it. It has to get a name. That's why I chose Samani. And there is a reference in it, but I think I'm the only person who knows it. And I never will say it, and I'm just curious what people sometimes think about it. And I got a lot of interesting attempts. What can it be? Why it is named like that? And also the subtitle, which says that it is a proposal to answer some important questions, is exactly what I have experienced. When I was spending time with the piece, that I was thinking a lot of things which kept me busy in the last days. So, and it helped me a bit.
Is that to be understood almost like a crystal ball, that actually can address questions to Samani, and you'll eventually find some answers to them?
I hope it works like a boule de voyant. I mean, it would be very nice. But it is also, the experience that you never can be sure who is there, who is opposite you, Is it alive or is it an object which is animated? There are moments in the first presentations when I presented a piece where it was like people were not sure if the piece is reacting to them or not. And I like this kind of blurring area where objects are getting an own life.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there's Moholy Nudge, light modular, who's an incredible piece and functions in a completely different way. Like, how did you come about to opt for this central pole? And actually, I think that's quite remarkable, that the engine is moving and the pole is just resting in the middle of space.
It has to do with pole dancing. So I just wanted the spot as a pole dancer. So it was very simple. That was clear that it has to be a pole from the beginning. I never thought about anything else. So I wanted to have it. It was interesting that the shape of the pole, if you see it now, for a lot of people, it's opening the door of references, because it's exactly the shape of the Mies van der Rohe poles. But when I had to design it, that was the only shape how I could design it. Because I needed a certain diameter of the piece, but I wanted to look it slim. So that was the only way to create a cross. So then later somebody told me, an architect, that is the shape how Mies van der Rohe was for the modular system creating the things. And I thought, oh, interesting. I did not know it. I mean, normally I like to play with these references, but in this case, I was not looking for the references, they were looking for me. So,
maybe last question. There are scales, like the musical scores contain scales, which is almost kind of it's a very nice show-off, because the engine shows like its musical education, so to say, that it knows about the tradition of music and a certain system. Like what are other kind of patterns that you use for the musical composition? Because maybe it's important to stress the fact that the engine is the musical instrument. So I think the speeds actually of the engine change the frequency of the sound.
It's like when you drive a car and you have your handbrake, and you can also make sounds with that. So it's a little bit like that what it is. It's really the engine. There's nothing which is edited, or there's nothing what is additional use. And for me, it was an interesting revenge with my music teacher, because he was telling me that I totally non-music. I have no idea about music, and I cannot really understand a tone. I cannot make a distinction between high and low tones and these things. So that's why I never learned an instrument. So, and when I had to deal with this, the first thing, I enjoyed it very much, and the second thing, the piece got invited a year ago to Donaueschingen and the Composer Festival as a composition. So, and that was more a very private revenge that I found teachers are all the time wrong.
Thank you very much, Olaf. And I think we should go on with Richard. Richard presents a film, First Point. It's a newly created work. It's a world premiere at Art Basel Unlimited. Maybe just a short curatorial introduction into Richard's work and what I deeply appreciate. I think nowadays we have so much imagery around us. We are all picture experts. We know so much about imagery and we consume so much imagery. And you could think that we got really kind of maybe also distant towards the reading of imagery. And I always admire the incredible expertise of Richard, how to irritate through images. He did that all these past years mainly through painting. Actually, he introduces different types of images that he paints. And obviously, I mean, there's always a discussion if painting has some anachronistic aftertones. And I think Richard is really able to use painting as a place of negotiation, to negotiate images, to negotiate also the value of images, to negotiate taboos, when he has done such things as, for example, appropriation of a faux naive painter. So actually, if you appropriate an image that is commercial, it's one thing, but if you appropriate from a painter that is said to be naive, it opens up a completely different discussion. But actually, he did it in a way that was so wide by also writing a wonderful text for Parquet magazine and having a really interest in the work of that artist, that actually something quite unexpected happened. It's the same thing with, for example, pornographic image, also commercial image, icons, godlike actors and pop stars. Like he really, like sometimes I almost call it, it has a soft fascistic touch to it, which is totally irritating. So he also works quite often with, I don't know if you would agree, but I would say vulgarity, but a very well-reflected vulgarity. Like I always contradict people who tell me, yeah, but this is kitsch. I say, no, this is not kitsch. Like kitsch is not reflected. But if you deliberately go for iconography that has a certain vulgar potential, I think it's completely something different. Mm-hmm. Richard, thanks for being here, and thanks for giving an insight into this amazing production of First Point.
Vulgar production. No, that's thank you, Gianni, and thanks very much also for taking the chance with our film. It was quite great to meet with Gianni, and we shot the footage for First Point last August in Malibu, and it was really was kind of a follow-up. I have another film that I did with Lindsay Lohan, who is the actor in our film, and I also made a film with the adult star Sasha Grey, and we shot those in May of last year, only a few months before this film. And those films had been intended to be shown in Venice as a part of the Commercial Break series that Dasha and also Neville Wakefield had put together. Well, those pieces never were shown in public, but they ended up being a part of the kind of landscape of public relations that were around Venice last summer. And so in August, we only shot with Lindsay for one day, and at the end of that one day, we decided that it would be really great to continue our work together and try to work again in the future. And that opportunity came in August, and we returned to Malibu, which was the place of our first work together. And in this case, where the first film, which you can see online if you Google Lindsay Lohan and my name, and it comes up on YouTube, which was the site for those works, we decided that for this piece we were going to explore something past the the initial motion portrait objective of the first two films, where the first two films were inspired by Godard's Contempt and Ingmar Bergman's Persona, and focused on an actress and a point of transformation in her life, which certainly Lindsay was at that point and May of last year. The second film was based on the narrative that was kind of presupposed by her being in this kind of Malibu environment. And that is a kind of a surf film, and combined with a kind of mid-90s LA noir. So we used as our inspiration the underground surf films of the late 1960s and the LA noir films of David Lynch of the mid-90s. And so with that structure, we storyboarded and prepared ourselves to go out and make a film that, I'm not a filmmaker and haven't really made video art, haven't made any fashion films, and nor cinema. So we, in meeting and getting together with my collaborator Taylor Steele, who is as a person who's a great director of surf films and who has done about 40 surf films, we all got together and decided to work on this new form of motion imagery that became titled First Point due to the fact that it was shot in part at Surfrider Beach, was one of the most famous breaks in California. And the objective of the film, really, in working with a personality such as Lindsay, who's a global figure and a singular global figure in the sense that she occupies media like no other individual in Hollywood or beyond. I mean, the way that the Globe has focused on her beauty, on her life, and on her and on the ins and outs of what's going on in her life, puts an incredible amount of pressure on the way that she conducts herself in public and or how the public views that. So that in itself became a part of the subject of our film, as through the aperture of the sensation of late 60s surf film, and also this idea of terror and noir kinds of tropes that we also addressed in the film. So our experience that we tried to create was one where that sense of being observed, that sense of projecting iconic images, like here would be like the iconic image of the aside that would happen in a surf film, where the camera is taken away from the professional surfer and put onto the bikini clad beach girl, or so we wanted to use those different types of archetypes together. The surfer in our film, Cassia Madar, is important in the sense that she's probably the world's #1 female surfer, and to have Lindsay's specific type of persona combined with the actions and the beauty of and the power of Cassia's surfing was something that we wanted to go one-to-one, and that balance we wanted to ultimately have fall apart in the film, and then that's where the night sequence begins. Tying it all together, we had the great work of Thomas Bangalter, who's a great composer, who's done the soundtracks for Tron and for Irreversible, and he was able to create our essentially our dialogue through sound, and that binding element brought it all together, and it's what we have here for my first film presentation at.
I have a question for you. You have made an amazing painting with Rob Lowe. Mm-hmm. The title is God.
Yes.
Could you when I watch the first part of the movie, mm-hmm. somehow I always have this, everything gets suspicious in a way that I really have the impression that a strange kind of religious feel comes to it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's given on one hand by the beauty of this film goddess, mm-hmm. on the other hand by the water, and all this kind of baptizing almost this mm-hmm. film figure, or she comes, it's in between Botticelli, some feelings I have. It's mm-hmm. much more, it's not a scientific mm-hmm. view on it, but it's rather an impression, and it makes me feel very emotional. I can't almost like when you go to opera, and you have this amazing voice and you feel the tears coming up, and mm-hmm. you're holding back because you think, so what's going on? That shouldn't happen,
Well, we were focusing on the idea of pulsing of iconic images, and so you know, as a painter, you know, you're dealing with like the inverse of what we're dealing with in the film. You know, it's all of it comes down to you and the canvas and creating a static image. But with the opportunity to create these pulses of iconic imagery, you know, we worked very hard with our wardrobe, and Lindsay's very conscious about how she projects to the camera, and she's extremely skilled at that. So the production of the intensity of her image, and you know, even in particular this one, is something that she's very aware of how she produces her image to be consumed in the outside world. So that idea of a godlike quality, I mean, we only experience that through our imagery and our meditation on that imagery. And so for 5.5 minutes, we work on that, you know, on the emotional, you know, constituent elements of that.
But could one say that you work with the archetypes of pop culture and of late pop culture?
Well, to the degree that, I mean, Lindsay is an absolute icon of contemporary pop culture. You know, she's already, you know, possessed Marilyn in a certain sense in media. She's now in the business of acting the role of Elizabeth Taylor. So by age 25, she will have already, you know, enveloped those two icons of 50-year-old pop into present-day culture. And then at 25, she has her whole future ahead of her to be, you know, Lindsay Lohan. So I think it's not so much, you know, it's something that we agreed upon, that we worked towards, and that it's a collaboration between the whole group to make this imagery come alive.
But how do you explain that, for example, nowadays everybody's fine with a can of Campbell soup? Mm-hmm. You know, everybody is totally at ease with it and knows that it's part of art. Mm-hmm. But actually the introduction of Lindsay Lohan into the art context is still something that obviously irritates people. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting to watch people I talked to. Mm-hmm. Some of them love it, they're totally into it, and others think, so, no, you can't do that, which I think is a quality of the work.
I mean, the idea that you can't do that, I think, is an interesting thing. A news service, you know, asked me what art, you know, the art world fears the most, and that's, you know, instability. It's like a market, you know, it's like a commercial market that's not sure of where to find value. And I think that when you look at contemporary media-based imagery, you know, we want to assign the degradation of it as its you know, co-value compared to what it's being raised up to. So, you know, not unlike, you know, luxury degradation. But in a certain sense, with Lindsay, we looked at the media element of it, and we, you know, saw that as an area to claim as a space for the work to work. So, in addition to the film that we have here, we had, you know, 16 different unique deliverables that, you know, entered all media markets, including 4 trailers, which had, you know, within 48 hours of the film being released to the public 4 days before Basel, had been seen by 16 million people. So it inverted the idea that you come to Basel to see the artwork. Everyone saw the artwork first, and it pointed back to Basel. So this work is known in most media markets around the world, and then it features itself here as a singular experience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gianni.
The third artist with us is Germaine Kruip. She has contributed one of the 2 performance pieces in the show, Circle Dance. It's performed 3 times a day, just in the entrance section of Art Unlimited. Germaine Kruip is as well, she's an artist who works with many different medias. I think she's also driven actually by ideas, and she picks the appropriate media to realize her ideas. I remember an amazing work that she did for Frieze Art Fair, which is of course in a tent at Regent's Park in London, and it was just a wandering shadow actually on this entrance hallway of the fair. So like most people probably maybe saw it, maybe some of them knew that it was an artwork or had maybe a suspicion that it could be an artwork, and many others maybe just had like this impression of a shadow passing by at a certain moment. Another work is Image Archive. It's like a collection of images that are related by iconography. The most striking one for me is Che Guevara with the Bolivian officers compared with Rembrandt's anatomy lesson. And actually, from a formal aspect, Germaine shows actually a different course of history. It seems to be that humans just take in the same constellation every now and then for important moments, or maybe those important moments are read by the constellation of bodies and by the fact that some bodies are living and some bodies are dead. Germaine, it's great that you accepted the invitation to speak to us, because I think it's also a piece that makes people think, and that is kind of almost of a shock in the moment when they encounter a real person performing in the context of Art Unlimited. Maybe you can sketch out a little bit how you created this piece and what was important to you.
Yes. Well, first of all, also thank you for being part of this incredible exhibition and opportunity to show this piece in this context. It was, I think, also the thought of Art Unlimited that made me make this work. We have been thinking of making a proposal for Art Unlimited some time, because I make kind of big light installations or works that are difficult to show in a booth or in a gallery, so that we thought that would be good to show it at Art Unlimited. But then when we actually thought of the proposal, I really was thinking, do I really want to show at Art Unlimited, and what would I like to see there? And then I really went back to kind of real experience, and maybe it's an experience on another level that would be not like a physical big work, but maybe more a mental work, which spreads out also on another level. So I was thinking for a while or I am working at the moment with people that execute rituals, and I introduce them in my work. And I got really inspired by these dervish dancers that make this kind of like this round movement, this continuous movement, and it's like a meditation. But looking at it, it's also a kind of physical experience. It's a movement where one hand is going up and the other hand is going down, and in fact, the movement, this repetitive movement, is channeling the upper, like a spiritual or something above. They don't really name it what it is. They're channeling it down to the ground, to the earth. So it's a kind of transitional movement. I also, each time when I'm at art fairs, I'm really always like curious about the motivation of collectors, how they buy and how this all works. And of course, here in Basel, it's a kind of there's a lot of money involved, and but I think the main motivation is that a lot of collectors are looking for something. They're collecting because they're in search of something else, something maybe not really put into words, something abstract. But so I thought also that that would be kind of interesting kind of link when between this dervish dance, this connection between I just skip a step because when I thought of this dervish dance and to incorporate it into my work, I often strip down situations to its bare essence. So I did the same with the dervish dancer, who I looked for 2 months. It's very difficult to enter into this world and to find also maybe someone who would be, ready to make some adaptations. And when I found him, so there was first a long dialogue, and I thought it would be interesting to not perform this dance with traditional costume, but in a costume that would be like more a collector's costume, a suit, just something that would be, something that would be accepted as a kind of daily look here. And also something else was that I didn't want music, and because it would be like too performative. I wanted it to be something that kind of appears and disappears in the fair, like a bare movement, and seeing if this repetition of this movement could also like change something without, just by a movement, if there is a kind of transition. And so he accepted not to use also sound, and also normally he would dance with more dancers, and he accepted to dance in himself. What happens is really that it becomes also for himself, for the dancer, kind of very, becomes a very personal dance. Normally this is like a ritual, like they're performed in a group, in a cultural context, and so he totally changed the context into, well, and accepted it, which is also a kind a characteristic to the Sufi culture, to be very open, to really accept the other, and to just not judge it beforehand. So he was like, okay, a fair. He never has been at a fair. So it has been like a very interesting piece, I think, also for the performer himself. But also, I think the reactions have shown also that, it's a total other encounter in this context, I believe. And
what was really nice to see is actually that on one hand we are all used to performance art. I mean, performance art is so much around nowadays, and you encounter everywhere, and we're really well trained for it. But on the other hand, I must say that was for me a very distinctive moment where the complexity of the context of being in a fair erupted for me. Because like before, I really thought, I mean, the walls are, it's great quality, and actually the setting is fine, you know, and through the splendid isolation of the positions, you can kind of make it happen, this museum, just for a couple of days. But I think to have a performer within that space, it questions much more also the social responsibility that this type of exhibition has, you know, because it's somebody like exhibiting himself, like performing, working, and it's like, it's much more sensitive. It seemed much more sensitive to me.
But it's also very strange, like, it's very intimidating also to look at it, I think, or it's impressive. It's kind of vulnerable to look at the performer. You really think, like, you become a little bit dizzy. But I noticed, like, and that was very interesting to discover, especially at the opening when there were many people. He started to dance, and then, like, nobody noticed him because he was just walking in a suit, and he just started slowly to turn. And he always makes first a kind of greeting to the space, which is like directed to Mecca, and then he starts slowly to turn, and then he suddenly like lifts up his hands, and then people were like, oh, something is happening, and then suddenly like this group of people like were like a perfect circle, and this circle always has been the same circle. So he just asked me today, don't you? I feel like there's a kind of energy between me and the public, and do you feel that too? And it's true that there's like always the same circle in the same distance between him and the public, which slowly forms because sometimes people are just talking and don't see him dancing at first. And so that was also like a deliberate choice of mine too. I don't like to put something on a pedestal. I like things to disappear in a context, to almost that they are adapted in another context. So there's like, I remember when we had to fill in the form, no walls, no light, we said no to anything. And I thought just to appear with this dancer and just to make this bare movement in the kind of, in the context of this fair, what would happen? And what does it make of, what does it, it's also like it creates a question, I think. And also the link between the performer, how he looks like, I like the kind of connotation of the collector, because I almost see, I almost like to think of the collector looking for the unanswered, and that there's something, above or behind or under. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Maybe just a couple of words about the curatorial concept. I really like our talk because it reflects a lot what I try to do with Art Basel Unlimited. I put all my trust into singular positions. Basically, I really thought of Unlimited as a sky, and each artist's position as a star. I mean, not in the sense of a media star, but really as a star. And I didn't want to put artists in the Milky Way, because there it would be much more difficult actually to read that specific message. So I tried really to have a maximum variety in not placing large works next to each other, in not placing cinematographic work or like works with cinematographic references next to each other, by not placing works that are dealing with abstract painting, for example. There are quite a lot of them. By not choosing, for example, color. I mean, it's kind of obvious that there's a lot of pink for no reasons. It's pure coincidence. But I mean, there would have been ways, to kind of build up groups or neighborhoods and to say, let's imagine, this is the pink neighborhood. Another one is the notion of time. There are a lot of works that deal with time. Yitish Kalat's moon calendar, for example. Laura Owen's watches. In Ugo Rondinone, there's also a watch without the face, and it's a frozen moment. I could have done probably a nice show about time, the notion of time and how subjective actually we experience time. But I knew that it was completely the wrong way to go, because exactly for that reason, I didn't want to create the Milky Way. I wanted to create single stars. But nevertheless, there are star constellations that you can spread over the sky of Unlimited, and then you start to have like a dialogue with yourself, for example, about abstract painting or near abstract painting. I really read Walid Beshti's copper plates with the finger imprints as nevertheless kind of an attempt also to make a contribution to abstract painting with very different means. So for me, it was really important to respect the eccentricity of each artwork. And what is interesting is it's the inverse process that you normally have when you curate a group show. And I'm not even sure if to curate a group show after some specific and distinctive characteristics of a work is the right thing to do, because the problem is also that you weaken other parts of the work. And I think the great thing about an artwork is the controversial potential that the work has, and it's also the enigma that you have. And I think you weaken the enigma eventually by putting works together that seemingly have something to do with each other. So actually, Art Basel Unlimited was a great job. On the other hand, it accentuated even my crisis, my ever-existing curatorial crisis of doing group shows. So I think it's very difficult to do group shows that open up artworks rather than closing them down. So I think we should also give the public the chance to address a couple of questions to the artists, and maybe we should open the microphone. No questions? So maybe we could just bring in one question, one general question. I think it was quite interesting. I was discussing with Fidel Barlow, and she said, probably we don't know anymore what modernism is or postmodernism is, because everything is kind of like, all the artworks also in Art Unlimited are somehow affected, by what happened through modernism. We have a knowledge in general, I think, that is quite wide. And I think Art Unlimited is a platform that really reflects the last 40 years. It's an open field, and through that, it's kind of a historical presentation. And I was asking myself if we could see it as a model you know, that it's much more about the refinement of existing ideas than the creation of generally new artworks. Richard, do you want to take first take on that?
Well, I mean, I think what I appreciate about Art Unlimited, and I've had a chance to really look at a lot of it, is in the temporal nature of it, in the sense that it's 6 days, but there's a great deal that you can accomplish in 6 days, and I think that the kind of the pressure that it creates in terms of people being excited about seeing the work and going to see all of the work, you get the cross-pollination of all the ideas. I mean, from performance to installation, and for me, the experience of seeing all the other artists' work, it has an effect on one's own, production sensibility. Even in the installation process, we were in the midst of putting it together, but then you would go around and see the way that all of the rest of it was coming together and forming this kind of organism that, is ephemeral, will only be here for 6 days, but you go into it knowing that you'll have a very highly focused audience. So I think that it's a new kind of experience, and it's an experience that is increasingly becoming more important in the sense that people demand the highest quality, or the most intense experiences in short periods of time, so that they can discuss it and then move on. So I think that what I appreciate about being here and having the chance to experience all the other artists' work is that it definitely affects one's sensibility, it affects one's discourse.
Thank you. Germaine?
Well, I totally feel like also the remark you make, like this higher concentration of public, and I think that's really interesting, like how people are, with what kind of energy they come in here. I think it's really interesting I think it's a real mix of like older context-based works and newer ones. Mine was almost specially, or I think was almost created because of this context. I felt like a necessity to make this work at this moment, and probably it will start to travel on from here on. But I think it's a very important space next to the art fair, the classic art fair. So yeah, I think that's I enjoyed it. I think I got many surprising reactions, and very open reactions also, which is not always the case. So that's true.
Thank you.
I think what Richard was pointing out, this new experience, that you really have a different way not only to perceive, also what you want to get and how you are catched up, how you want to return and to see again. This is a thing which I think it is not a new concept, but it is something which I found in the last years developing much more. Not only in the art world, you have it everywhere. I mean, if you look, no department stores selling objects anymore. There are concept stores with a lot of different experiences, and you have to get access to different levels. You're on the one side, you want to be entertained. On the other side, you're an intellectual being, and you want really to get something out of it. And you don't see a contradiction if one constellation is serving both, and you're not asking for this or that. So that is something what you can experience here as well. But there's something what I think with the concept, what is under Unlimited now here, which is interesting, is when you think about time. How is time involved in that? There are a lot of pieces which need time to be experienced in a different way, not like a painting. A painting is there, it is not transforming. But a performance is an experience in time and space, and you need to experience that, and if you experience it again, it's a different thing. And I think how you have time incorporated in this kind of commodified world, I found very challenging, because the most interesting things are the things where the contradictions of experiences are putting on the edge and not where they're made flat. So I really like that there are contradictions, because on the one side, I'm very happy that so many people are here. On the other side, I, as a single person, appreciate very much to have a single lonely moment with an artwork where I really can experience it and where I really get touched. You know, I mean, that is a contradiction which you cannot erase. I mean, it is there. And I found it most interesting if you just point the contradiction really so sharp as possible. And that is what's happening here. I mean, and that's why I find it very interesting for me to be part of this experience.
I mean, I think one thing I wanted to add to that there's a connection in terms of emotional resonance. I mean, even if it's in, you know, inanimate objects or performance or in film, that, you know, when we speak about a condensed experience, that there's an emotional resonance that you carry with you after that. You know, after experiencing the presence of a person in business clothing suddenly, taking over that moment, or a machine gaining, like taking on personality and expression and time. And for me, with a film, it's the sense of what happens afterwards, what you take with you, the resonance of that hypnotic state of being engaged with an artwork, whether it's, you know, a static object to performance to moving objects. And so that's something that I think, you know, it ties together, and there's so many different sociological and, you know, philosophical positions and art, you know, and aesthetic positions being taken. It's like a web. That universe that you describe is that kind of web that you look at when you know, peer down from the universe onto our planet, you know, in a certain sense. Not to get too spacey, but.
Thank you very much. It's very much in my thoughts, in my stream of thoughts. Actually, I always thought that unlimited, the first thing that people speak out is size. They always think of, oh, super size, that's unlimited, you know, it's large. And I always was convinced that size is a complication. It's not a favor that you do to an artwork, because it takes more than only size, you know. If you look at the Franz West, it's a miraculous object to me. It's like, how can something be so big, so pink, have such a funny form, you know, and function as both, as having a glance at irony, but at once being a serious contribution to the history of sculpture. And I think it's quite remarkable. But for me, it was always important to stress this other side of unlimited, like unlimited impressions, unlimited frequencies, and actually an adding up of I think the greatest thing about art for me after all these years is really that all the ontology of art is visually based. And I think you can write many things, but eventually you have to experience it, you have to look at it. And I think the sum of all these impressions and of this thinking visually with art is really what I wanted to achieve with Unlimited. And that's the notion of Unlimited I was looking for. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks, Olaf, Germaine, Richard, for being here. Thank you very much.